To review the Sunday papers, we're joined this morning by the Europe editor of the Sunday Times, Peter Conradi, who's also the author of Who Lost Russia? From the Collapse of the USSR to Putin's War on Ukraine, and Samantha de Benden, Associate Fellow at the Royal Institute of International Affairs and Russia Specialist. A very warm welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us this morning. What a 24 hours. I mean, not a surprise that all the front pages are leading on this Russian rebellion, as it's being called. Samantha, to you first, if I may. Let's look at the front page of the Sunday Times. Putin humiliated by mutiny. Certainly, the rebellion, did end last night. But what damage do you think this will have done to him?
Well, I think this is a really interesting headline because the whole question is who is most humiliated by this coup attempt. And I actually agree that it is Putin who is humiliated the most. And if you think about what happened, I mean, here you had an army of 20 to 25,000 men who drove practically to the gates of Moscow in less than 24 hours. If you remember, Putin's initial war aims were to take Kiev in 3 days, and nearly a year and a half into the war, he still hardly moved forward at all. And yet, Yevgeny Prigozhin crosses practically all the way to Moscow in 24 hours. This is humiliating for Putin because his army did not stop him. And one image that really struck me yesterday was the image of Yevgeny Prigozhin in the town of Rostov, where his Wagner group took the military headquarters early in the morning. And he's sitting having a cup of tea with two senior generals. One of them is the Deputy Defense Minister, and the other one is Lieutenant General Alexeyev, who is rumoured to be behind Skripal poisoning. And they're sitting there drinking tea. The generals are not armed. Obviously, their men did not stop Wagner from taking their headquarters. And he's telling them off like a teacher telling off a bunch of naughty schoolboys. So this is what Putin's army has been reduced to being scolded by someone who was a criminal, who is now a seasoned businessman and an arch communicator with an army, who's basically managed to get the whole world to draw attention to him. And this is really humiliating for Putin. Second thing which is really humiliating is Putin said yesterday morning, all this will be dealt with, all measures will be taken, this is treason. And a few hours later, a deal is announced and all charges are dropped. So I can't imagine how he will come out of this without having his authority seriously damaged.
Yeah, interesting. And as you say, Rostov-on-Don was taken without shot even being fired. Very interesting indeed. Peter, front page of the Telegraph, their headline, Wagner mutineers turn back after striking deal with Putin. And we now know that was brokered by the leader of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. What do you think was said in that phone call?
Yeah, I think we'll never know, unfortunately. I mean, what an extraordinary deal, and indeed what an extraordinary outcome. I mean, I was working on this story all day yesterday for the Sunday Times, and I mean, when the news flashed up that this is how it was all ending, I mean, it just seemed absolutely extraordinary. So, I mean, the deal is that basically Prigozhin goes to Belarus, supposedly, and all sorts of questions are left unanswered. I mean, what will he actually do there? Does Lukashenko really want to have this warlord living on his territory? Does he really want to go there? I mean, I get the impression that there's an awful lot more that is going to come out in the next few days, and that this is sort of put a temporary stop to it, probably because in a sense both Prigozhin and Putin were kind of boxed into a corner. Prigozhin had barely 2,500 men, we think. I mean, there's no way he could have taken Moscow with them. On the other hand, Putin couldn't be sure that all his forces would actually remain loyal and wouldn't just go quietly over to Prigozhin. So, a solution had to be found. It was found in very dramatic fashion, thanks to Lukashenko, who is to a great extent Putin's stooge. But the real question, I think, is what will happen next.
Samantha, what next for Evgeny Prigozhin? Mutineers tend to end up dead, don't they? Has he signed his own death sentence here? Certainly, front page of the Mail. Let's have a look at that headline. Did Putin bribe coup leader to quit Russia? I mean, I guess what was the deal that they did? And what next for him? Are we going to hear that he fell off a balcony in a few months' time in Belarus?
Well, to be honest, I'm pretty baffled by what happened yesterday, and I've been studying Russia, observing Russia for the past 30 years. And this is an interesting question. Did Putin bribe a coup leader? Or does the coup leader have something so damaging over Putin that Putin eventually decided not to take him out, not to have him killed? He could have had him killed yesterday if he wanted to. He could have dropped a bomb on the column. I can't believe that it wouldn't be possible for Putin to have gotten rid of him if he really wanted to yesterday, unless the power structures are completely collapsing. And there have been questions in the sort of Russia observers community for months now over who is pulling the strings. Is it Putin, or is it now becoming Prigozhin who's pulling the strings? And for a long time, people have been believing, and for me, this only reinforced it yesterday, is that Prigozhin has some really damaging information on Putin that Putin does not want to get out. And not only Prigozhin has that, otherwise you could just get rid of Prigozhin. There's someone else behind Prigozhin who's also got this information. And also Prigozhin allegedly knows where a lot of Putin's money is hidden. So something is going on behind the scenes here, and I confess that after sort of practically 2 sleepless nights, it's becoming very difficult to see through the fog. But the next days will show us what happens to Prigozhin. Is he really going to go to Belarus? Because he said he's going to Belarus. We saw him leave Rostov last night in an armored car and shaking hands with people, a bit like a politician or a movie star leaving the town. Where is he this morning? Did he go to Belarus? That is still the question, and that really remains to be seen. So a deal took place. That Putin and Prigozhin found acceptable. And who holds what over whom? Remember, this is not. Can't think of this in terms of a government uprising or coup. This is a fight between 2 mafia bosses. I think we have to think of this in terms of The Godfather.
Okay.
Not a government.
And Peter, of course, crucially, what does this mean for the war? What does this mean for the Wagner Group? They played a really important role for the Russian side so far, drafted in when the Russian army was doing rather abysmally. And what does this mean on the battlefield?
Yeah, I think in looking at that, we've got to remember, in a sense, why all this appears to have started. And it appears to have started because a couple of weeks ago, a directive was sent out essentially attempting to absorb the Wagner forces into the regular Russian army. So they were told, Prigozhin was told that his men had got to join regular Russian forces by July the 1st. So now what has been the result? That has been rescinded, but on the other hand, they have been told that their forces are free, their soldiers won't be prosecuted for having taken part in the uprising, and they are free to join the Russian army. What does that mean? Is that just compulsion by another word or what? So, that's one important element. I mean, let's say at its most chaotic yesterday morning, when it looked like, Prigozhin really was going to make it all the way to Moscow, that looked like extraordinarily good news for the Ukrainians, that kind of chaos. In the sense in which order has been restored rather quickly is, I suppose, bad news for the Ukrainians, but it also, it must be good for their morale. I mean, there were these lines around yesterday that someone, a key figure in Ukraine, was saying, we're running out of popcorn here because it's such a great show. There is a sense that anything that exposes Russia for being the kind of the gangster state that it is very great. I think also for the Ukrainian broader, one could say, the Ukrainian propaganda cause in the world.
Yeah, certainly this is a gift for Ukraine in many ways. Samantha, just a final thought from you, if I may. Russian civilians, we'll show another of the front pages. The Sunday Mirror, they've got a very striking headline as well. Putin pushed to brink, horror as mercenaries launch armed uprising. But certainly, you know, at the beginning of the war, Russian civilians were not impacted by the conflict in Ukraine. It really now has come to their doorsteps. They've been told not to travel, mass outdoor gatherings have been banned for a month. Do you think this is going to change public opinion in Russia?
I did, but now I don't anymore. And one of the reasons is that one of the images, another image that struck me yesterday was of these Russian civilians in Rostov sitting, drinking cappuccino, and with their iPhones filming men, armed men, on the ground with Kalashnikovs taking aim at some random target. We don't know what they were aiming at. And then other images last night of women going up to these Wagner mercenaries and asking to have selfies with them, shaking hands. We have had images of Rostov also.
We're going to have to leave it, Samantha, on that rather striking image you just described. Thank you both so much. We'll see you again next hour, and we'll have all the latest on that situation in Russia, the rebellion that appears to have been called off at the top of the hour. Stay with us.